There we go. Let's get rid of that. Let's do some talking. The music ended at just the right point there, so I just pressed pause and just left it. Let's click soundbar. Our turns. There we go. What we'll do then? Let's hit that. Hey, oh blimey! Completely whited out. That's massively unhelpful. No. Which of these is worse? Let's do that. Massively not helped at all by the lighting in this room. Let's go that way so my back's a little bit to that. What a terrible start. Been off for a month, can you tell? There we go though. Let's do that. Let's also get the camera on straight. I go away for a month and it all just goes to pot, doesn't it? It all goes to hell in a handbasket. There we go. There's the hockey shelf in the view at least. That's what we wanted. There we go. Awesome. Hello. Yes. Those of you who watch on catch up, no password this time, but do stick in the chat where the holiday is this year, because the warm up question is, where are you warming up this summer? We are just going to check some bits and pieces on the tech just while people are doing that, because I want to make sure everything is actually working. If you're in the chat, do please say hello so I know this is all actually working. That would be really, really helpful. I appear to be appearing there at least, but if you're in the chat, do stick something in there. We are alarmingly prepared, by which I mean we're not prepared at all. Good evening, Ben. Ben, when are the highlights coming out, please? Because people are asking me again. But yeah, so we're prepared to the extent that Andrew Day is, to which I mean Andrew Day is prepared. Kinga, hello. We're so prepared. Andrew has sent me all the women's results ahead of time. That's how prepared we are today, in the sense that I actually have an email with all the scores and bits and pieces like that. And the first name, God love you, Andrew, but the first name that comes up, I have read 7 times and I still don't know if I'm going to pronounce this correctly. So this poor young lady is about to have her name absolutely butchered. So we're gonna roll with that. I hope you feel honoured. I've arranged a meal around me getting home to watch the stream. Thank you, Rossi. Much obliged. For all those bits and pieces. New Slapshot Syndicate obviously came out today. Those guys are going through bits, so make sure you check them out later too. We will, as I've just seen the time. We've got the water. Let's see if you can remember how we do this after a month. Guys, gals, and the gender fluid and all beyond the binary, it is Wednesday night, it is 8 PM. And welcome back to the BOTW What's Current stream. My name is Anthony Russell, here to take you through the weird, wonderful and wild world that is British ice hockey. We focus on the national division. That is our bread and butter. That is our home port. But of course, we're here to take you through absolutely anything and everything from across the NIHL. That means we got focus on the national division as well as Division 1 and Division 2 in the north and in the south. But he says, slightly changing the intro as well. We're going to chat about the women. We're going to chat about GB. We're going to chat about the Elite League. We're going to give it the whole 9 yards. I have managed to do something to one of my teeth, so if I sound like I'm talking funny, that's why. Nothing serious. Seeing the dentist on Friday about it, but just got there's a nerve issue that we need to get sorted. So there's painkillers doing their work as well tonight. So don't worry about that. So if I start sounding funny, then that's the reason for that one. But I hope you're all well. It's been a month that we have. This is what we do during the off season. We take a month's break between bits and pieces to just let stuff build up. Some people come back more often. Some people do even less. We just pop in at the back end of the month. Last Wednesday of every month, we come in, we chat about what's happened, and we just kind of see how things are going. But before we do, of course, we need to go through a little bit of housekeeping, as we usually do. Banners on the wall, wordpress.com, your number one source for all things related to British ice hockey, where you can follow me and my ridiculous ramblings, of course. No games to talk about because the season's done, but you can catch up on the last little while's worth of match reports over in our Banners on the Road series. You've got our That's a fair bit to get through. It is. We'll figure it out in 90 minutes, Ben. But yeah, Banners on the Road, of course, the match reports from everywhere we did through the last season, including our little mini-series, In the Box Thinking, where I commentated on bits and pieces for the Guildford Flames or for the Bees or anywhere else I was over the course of the last year. And of course, hockey stories, long-form, in-depth pieces of content from across the world of ice hockey. And of course, the latest piece is on there, the Gentleman Flyer, the one that I spent ages researching and then tripped over more research and did bits and pieces. The life of Constantine Cantacuzino, the former captain of the Romanian ice hockey team, gentleman, raconteur, World War II flying ace who fought on both sides of World War II, refugee from communism, and just a fascinating human being. And there is so much I left out of this man's life because I was trying to kind of weave in the threads of flying and ice hockey all into kind of one thing. But if you haven't checked that out and any of the other hockey stories pieces, we go from the 19th century to the present day, behind the Iron Curtain, into war, quite literally in the last piece, and beyond. So do go check out all those bits and pieces out in the last 14 and a bit years worth of stuff over at bannersonthewall.wordpress.com. Of course, the links to all of our socials are down in the description, including the link to buymeacoffee.com/BOTW. That is our virtual busking hat, where if you enjoy the bits and pieces that you get from BOTW, you can chuck a few quid in. If you can't, just share stuff out. It's all well and good, but all of that is down there in the description. If you aren't already subscribed to the channel, like the video, share the video, do all that good stuff. Let's keep that algorithm hamster happy, fat and fed. And then of course the great bit is that when we do pop around on the last Wednesday of every month during the off season, you get the chat, questions, comments, thoughts, feelings, anything people want to chuck in as we're going through the wonderful world of British ice hockey. Please do throw it in the chat. This is much better when it's a conversation rather than a monologue. But of course, if you are using the chat, please remember the golden rule here at BOTW. That is DBAD, don't be a dick, be respectful of other people's thoughts and feelings, and we're all going to have a jolly good time. People in the chat, John from NHL Rosters, of course, is in there, fantastic, a man who's busy as this time of year, rather than anything else. Yeah, there is an awful lot to get through tonight. So, here's the question. How are we going to tackle it? Because normally what we do is we work our way through the divisions, but there's so much news. What we're going to do is we're actually going to go mildly geographic, and we're going to go from the south and we're going to work our way up through the country and talk about some bits and pieces, of course, because we know that clubs all over the place have been doing their wares and sorting out bits and pieces. Of course, we know that down in South 1, if we're starting right at the very, very bottom of the country, because the southernmost team is Solent, of course, they've already started their bits and pieces. Harry Harcutt back, Callum Perella-Fox is back, Kane Russell back, Liam Coleman is back. In fact, the only actual player they've lost is Steve Osman, because he's gone and joined the Cardiff Canucks as part of that wonderful bit there. And a shout out, of course, to Jock Hutchinson, who has retired from the bench. Yes, that's very, very true, Ben. Yes, how long will Aaron Davies retire for? We'll talk about Blackburn as we start working our way up the country, because of course a man of that longevity deserves a little bit of a chat. But of course the big news out of the south, with all due respect to my friends down in Gosport, is the great National Division merry-go-round, because of course the club that this website was founded upon, the Basingstoke Bison, are back from the mist, so we are told, despite the fact the rink is not officially ready yet and we don't know when it's going to open, but we have a roster in Basingstoke. We have ownership in Basingstoke. We have a new head coach in Basingstoke. Before we focus too much on the Bison, we do need, of course, to tip our cap and send all of our best wishes to everybody connected to the Berkshire Bees, whether you were there from the Bracknell days from 1987 back at the John Knight, whether you joined during the Super League, during the EPL, during the NIHL. Obviously, I said my piece quite loudly and quite vociferously. I had a few people contact me who weren't super happy with some of the things that I said. Fortunately, I was able to have quite a constructive conversation with at least one person about it. Of course, the situation there with the Bees. Ultimately, nobody losing any teams is a good thing, and like I say, for 2 years, of course, my club has been off dancing on the ethereal plane. So I totally sympathise. Obviously, this is the decision the directors have made to try and take a year to figure out what they do with the Bees to make it as sustainable as they possibly can. It's been a tough old run in the last thing. I mean, that's a good point, actually, Tom. Why is it so, John? You got the website wrong. What are you doing there? I've just read that off of that. What am I talking about? But yes, he got hurt and didn't play. Yeah, no, he didn't. So technically, did he? Ooh, that's a good question, Tom. So he last did actually play for Solent. Technicality win. But yeah, so much love to everybody from the Bees. I hope you can find a place to have some hockey. Of course, if you've enjoyed going to Slough, the Jets are brilliant. There's the new Jets NIHL 2 side, which is going to be full of some fantastic up-and-coming young prospects. Queen Bees, Fire Bees, Slough Sirens. There's a bunch of hockey still in that neck of the woods should you wish to actually continue watching the sport. Or, of course, we will lay all old allegiances aside, and you are more than welcome in the newly refurbished Basingstoke. Should you take your fancy and wish to see some of your former Bees favourites there. But yes, this is the news, of course, and we did our sort of bonus live episode after the sort of welcoming event that was held at the Apollo Hotel in Basingstoke. So thanks to, for folk who joined in for that. But we do actually have a Basingstoke Bison roster of sorts. It's going to be an interesting one when we look at it. So just if we very, very quickly squiz at the fact that, of course, players out, nobody, because there's been nobody there for 2 years. In terms of who has come in, of course, we know we had the lot that was sort of announced in the immediacy on that first night, that sort of tranche, the first 4 Bs to move across. Stuart Mogg back in Basingstoke, having captained the Bees for the last couple of years. Will Stead moving across as well. Hallam Wilson back, of course. Hallam Wilson, one of the part of that team, along with Paul Petts, who coached the Basins, so Buffalo to the South 2 playoffs in 2024, and Liam Morris, because we all knew Liam Morris was coming back as soon as Basingstoke rejoined. And then, of course, there was the other big names announced on that night: Tom Relf and George Norcliffe both joining from the Romford Raiders, and the return to Basingstoke of Zach Milton leaves the Elite League and comes back down south to rejoin the party at the Silver Dome. And then we have had a couple of extra names brought in since then on the playing side. Brendan Baird steps back into the National Division after playing last year with Streatham in South 1. And another returnee, another former Bison, back in Bison colours. Announced today, in fact, of course, Adam Harding, having played in Bristol and having played in Telford. In fact, having to do a bit of a Liam Morris impression last year, Adam Harding, playing on defence in moments last year due to some of the injuries in Telford. And then, of course, we have the man who is going to be the man with the new plan, and that is Jeff Flanagan, who joins, having been part of the coaching staff at the University of Guelph in U Sports in Canada. Now, it seems that between the Elite League and the National Division, they have signed half of U Sports half the time, so why not get a coach from there as well? Bison fans of old, and unfortunately, it was 1 year before I was living in Germany when he was last in Britain. Flanagan was assistant coach at the Bison to Mark Bernard in 2004-2005. Since then, he has been on a bit of a journey. Won a women's national U Sports title with Guelph back at the back end of the 2010s. Not the most successful of coaching periods over in the Asia League with the Yokohama Grits, finishing bottom both years of the 5-team league that he was coaching there. Not a massive amount of regulation wins. I think it was 11 regulation wins in the 2 seasons. However, this season just gone back behind the bench, this time with the men's team at the University of Guelph. Finished middle of the pack in their conference in the Ontario University Athletics, in the Western Conference of that. Getting into the OUA playoffs, not progressing into the national playoffs for U Sports on that occasion. However, there was one thing that the Nels love, and it's somebody who loves to use Instat and analytics, and that is very much looking at bits and pieces. The sort of man that Jeff Flanagan is. He is going to be running the show in Basingstoke, and of course, we wait to see who else is going to come. The thing Steve Nell said on that first big night was that the coach was going to be the man to try and sign the imports. I wonder where our imports are going to come from in Basingstoke this year, having signed a man who's just coached in U Sports for the last year and spent the better part of the last decade in U Sports. I will say this now, because I'm pretty certain that we will see an import netminder in Basingstoke. For me, I note that one of my current favourite players playing in Australia was coached in Yokohama by Jeff Flanagan. So if Tatsunori Nishida ends up as the netminder for the Basingstoke Bison, I will be doing cartwheels, because I love Tatsu and he's a really, really polite gentleman, and I find him utterly hilarious when he loses his rag like he did the other day in Australia, and Olympic hammer threw his stick into his own post. Scutsy, yeah, we know, mate. We know. And we've sort of said our piece. Hopefully there is a way back. Hopefully there is a way back for the bees, and we will find out in due course, no doubt. As we sort of move up the country, we've done the bees, we've done the devils, we've done the bison. We do have to look slightly to the west as we move up the country, because of course Swindon and Bristol are the big bits of news. We knew, of course, about Jake Bricknell, he having broken bits and pieces in people's brains. That was doing the rounds in Coventry when that started. But what do we think about Josh Batch? Josh Batch, the Bristol, is a very, very interesting one. Of course, long-time fan favourite of the Cardiff Devils, scratched a lot at the end of last season for the Devils. Not even playing in the in the last sort of few games for them before. After the sort of announcement that he was going to leave the Elite League, and he's now, of course, moving away to Bristol. It is certainly a signing, I think, Bristol needed, because with all due respect, and I don't know whether King is still lurking around, and Jay King, of course, is back from Bristol too. But the one thing that the Pitbulls needed was defensive reinforcement, and getting an Elite League guy who can put up, who can log big minutes, do all the bits and pieces that needs to be done there. I think that's a pretty solid signing, all in all, for Bristol. I mean, we just look quickly in terms of who's back for the Pitbulls, because of course there's a few familiar names: Sean Morris, Jacob White-Say, Elliot Lewis, who we all knew were going to be back. Cammy Hamill, of course, is back. We do love that. We do like him, and of course now we have a duo of Smethams, because Reese's brother Owen has now joined. He joins on another long year. Another 3-year deal, just like Reese is on a 3-year deal as well. And then there's the like I said, we mentioned Jay King. Dawson Williams returns back to Britain, having played in the USPHL. USPHL pay-to-play league over in the US, sort of a single A junior level, not the highest of levels, all things considered. However, it's certainly a decent level of junior hockey compared to what you will get in Britain. A lot of young players have played in those sort of single A leagues, whether it was the WSHL, people like Deacon Fielder played over in Fresno, of course, or the USPHL, Kane Russells played over there. A few of the guys in the under 18s and under 20s have played in that league before. So seeing them kind of come. Seeing a few of those guys hit that age and be able to come back and play, whether it's a semi-pro or get called or potentially get looked at from higher levels, works really, really well. See Jamie in the chat there has said pretty impressive Bristol's recruitment so far. Yeah, it looks pretty solid. I think the biggest issue for Bristol again is going to be the overall depth of the overall depth of their defence, because and also, I think probably in some ways the bigger issue, their team defence, because I think a lot of times the 5-man unit on the ice defending is an issue. Was an issue for them last year. It was certainly an issue when I watched them play Swindon last year. Yeah, that game was a bit of a knock around where Swindon's players have basically been at Cheltenham all week and were a few shoots to the wind. But it's an interesting one to see. I assume that's probably Rossi using the Slapshot Syndicate account. Would be great to see someone like Max Wright there. Wright would be really, really interesting, because of course, having spent a season where he was incredibly busy and very good being busy, the worry sometimes is that you almost, if you're a keeper that does good when you're busy, if you have too good a defence in front of you, you kind of get thrown a little bit, because then the shot, if you're used to 40 shots and suddenly only face 20, it can kind of throw you for a bit of a loop. I am right to Basingstoke feels like the smarter money, but we will see. Bob Mitchell King, who's going to be doing a lot of travelling this year. USPHL, yes, thank you. Rhodes did, of course, play. He played for, what are they? The Wisconsin Rapid River Kings, I want to say, is their name, which I believe as well is where Kane Russell played in the USPHL. Oh, can't be a bit of water on that one. This is going to be a much more conversational show, because we ain't got bits and pieces to go through today, have we? But yeah, Bristol look interesting. Swindon, I think, are still looking pretty solid, all things considered as well. We did have a very interesting conversation with a fan who was very, like I say, just a bit of a, seemed very, very down on what Swindon were doing, because a few people had managed to, because a few people had left, because of course Bricknell was gone. Ballon Picozzi after 5 years in in Swindon has now shuffled on up north. But but ultimately, I think this Swindon roster, it still looks pretty solid, all things considered. There's still some names, of course, to come in terms of who we've got. I mean, you look at the people that they've kept, and the big thing really, I think, for Swindon is just their sheer depth at centre. I mean, yes, the people will talk about Ben O'Connor joining. We'll talk about Owen Griffiths joining, two elite league players dropping down into here. But you look at the centre depth that they've managed to get now. So you've got Griffiths, Glenn Billing, Sam Bullas can play at centre, and Chris Jones. That's 4 top 6 centres, effectively. That, is like, admittedly, love your Bully, but Sam Bullas maybe does not have the speed to be a top 6 centre anymore. But the one thing teams struggle with in this league is really, really good quality centremen who not only can do the work at the back, but can also really effectively pass the puck very well. And look at how strong Swindon are up the middle. Sure, Bricknell, people will talk about Bricknell, people will talk about we'll talk about Svek, but what's Svek without Sobchak? You need somebody to distribute the puck to them. And when you think of more than likely, because of course he's not officially been announced at this point, has Tomasz Malazensky, but you think that Aaron Nell, of course, can do a fair bit by himself, but will obviously be able to do some bits and pieces. But people like Reed Sayers, Aaron Nell, someone's got to give him the puck and move bits around, and there's a lot going on there for Swindon. I don't think it's all doom and gloom. Tyler Plu's back, of course, one of the better defensemen in the better stay-at-home defensemen in the league. Are Swindon going to do the bits and pieces I suggested they do? Probably not. They're going to keep running and gunning and play hockey their way. but ultimately, Swindon still look much stronger than Bristol do. Yes, there is an unknown factor about Bristol. However, there's something to be said for the fact that you can have a lot of sort of flashy names and having that unknown value. That's all well and good. But the one big advantage for Swindon every year is, yes, they make the same mistakes, but they also do know what they're doing, and there's something to be said with that. And also as well, like I say, it's who's the better coach out of Aaron Nell and Barry McKenzie? Tom Graham, I can see them in the chat. Aaron has played a lot of centre over the years as well, which obviously he has done, and he's not a terrible passer of the puck, which also helps line up options. But we all know where Aaron Nell is standing, and that's very much on the point at the power play. We made one change. You'll like Bebris as forward again. Yes, because Edgars Bebris is a power forward and should never have played on defence in the first place. At least, Sigala. At least I did ask Aaron Nell that to his face. What's Bob said there? River Kings have had Kane Russell, Jude Ayling, Lucas Bryant and Jake Bryson the past 2 seasons. So yeah, so a lot of hay made for young British players in Wisconsin Rapids, which is in Wisconsin. It's not one of those weird things where it's like Alabama Falls, Kentucky, or something weird like that. But yes, Bebris back at forward, where it should have been to start with, which of course adds some really, really good options, and you'll probably kind of get you some of that power forward bits out of that you didn't get from Bricknell. Having 4 imports this season, of course, means you can replace a lot of bits and pieces in the aggregate. You don't need one guy to score 60 goals because your extra import, if you get 2 extra imports and they score 40 goals between them, well, that's 80, and that's more. Apologies, just had a message from a Basingstoke supporting Fred Abide who said, we need a technical player who's not an import. Haha! Hello, Adam Harding. Either way, we move further up the country, of course. The Cardiff Canucks have been signing players. The Cardiff Fire, Ellis Shepherd back in charge for another year down in South 1. As we look across back towards the east, the Guildford Phoenix will be staying where they are. They are not moving out of Division 1, out of Division 2 into Division 1, despite the fact Peterborough Phantoms are obviously looking to move up from South 2 into South 1. The Guildford Flames seem to just be doing fun bits and pieces. We'll see what happens. We'll see what happens with them as we go along. As we move across round the M25 to Romford and the start of the Jason Buckman era. over in Romford. Of course, we have had some news actually as well out of the Romford Buccaneers, and that's that Elliot Dervish will not be back for next season, which is a bit of an interesting one, because that is, as far as we're aware, the only announcement out of the Buccaneers so far. Not expecting to see him in a Raiders uniform, all things considered, but not many people officially announced so far from the Raiders. Of course, Ewan Hill coming back home after spending last year in Bristol. Jack Cooper back, of course, after his testimonial, which is what it is on that front. Jake Sylvester back, no huge surprise there, as well as TJ Anderson, who for me needs to look at getting himself onto a two-way contract this year. Hello, Kevin Moore. But the one announcement we've had so far from Romford is a new import in the form of Jarrett Baker, who joins from Dalhousie University in U Sports. It's U Sports is what it is on that front. We know the sort of player that we're going to get. We know obviously Miller and Schufelt, lots of got lots of plaudits last year, and of course we know from Mr. Miller's interview with Slapshot Syndicate that he is still in two minds as to whether he returns to play next year, and whether it is time for him to move on from hockey as a career. So we will see what happens on that one. Not many people there in Romford, so it's hard to kind of know. Not going to make any. We make no assessments without data, without enough data in this place. Of course, in terms of who's out, Adam Leishram, he wants to go back to playing. We know that, and Tom Ralph and George Norcliffe, of course, have disappeared off. Yes, he was a teammate with Miller, who's probably the person who put him onto it. Whether he comes back himself remains to be seen. A lot easier to move Beveridge back forward when you have O'Connor and Ed Bradley to add to the British D group. Again, though, very similar stylistically. The big thing I think for Swindon will be is if Ryan Wells comes back. A lot of chatter that he won't, of course. But if I'm Swindon, I'm keeping that one firmly in my back pocket. That is a late announcement, or it is a season ticket holders middle of July barbecue announcement. You don't give a Ryan Wells announcement away just like that, all things considered. But so yeah, Romford, we sit, we watch, we wait on that front as we look a little bit further to the east. Chelmsford, of course, having secured the South One Cup last year, adding bits and pieces to adding names and the like to their roster. Of course, the big signing for Chelmsford, arguably, Ross Miller, leaving the Oxford City Stars and fancying his chances at some silverware within South One. With all due respect to my friends in Oxford, very tough season for them last year. Mark Saunders will be leading the ship again at the Ox Pens, but but Miller is the replacement for Jordan Lauday, of course, who has retired from hockey to move his family over to Canada. Whereas down in Invicta, a very familiar name back in Dynamo's colours for next season, Andy Smith returns to the ice after some time away. He'll, of course, massively good friends with head coach Carl Lennon, and Brad Windybank, of course, will be back for the Dynamos next season, as will, for me, arguably one of the finest leaders in my time watching British hockey, Aaron Connolly, will again throw on. We again be part of the Horsemen for 25-26. No big news at the moment out of the Warriors in Chelmsford or the Mustangs in Invicta. We do mention about Oxford, of course. Like I said, the only real news: no return for Ross Miller, but Mark Saunders will again be leading the charge. But they'll be interesting as to what happens with Oxford, because they'll be battling towards the bottom of South One alone. As the MK Thunder have. Finally, it should be said, and this I think is a good move for them, the MK Thunder have moved and have left South 1 for South 2. For me, this is entirely the right decision. It would not surprise me if England Ice Hockey have lent on the ownership at MK to do this somewhat. However, this is a great move for the MK Thunder. I think it's going to benefit them massively, because I think it will just make them much more competitive. It might have been predicated slightly on Peterborough going up, because I think there'll be a bit of a gap there, but going to be very, very interesting to see where they land. Back east, however, somewhat, the Haringey Huskies, who are left kind of scratching their head somewhat, having initially joined the Bees as part of their development pathway. We're now kind of left without that sort of upper ceiling. Of course, there's been talk of the Huskies wanting to step up. It again looks like they will not do that. Lee Mercer, the owner of the Huskies, had talked about buying Fife, but that does not appear to have materialised either. And we will see really kind of what happens with the Huskies there. Of course, new coaching set up there. A few familiar names, I'm sure, will be back. However, there are a couple of the younger prospects that will be interesting to see who moves up. I think the big thing for the Huskies is kind of getting their net minding locked in and settled down. Very interesting to see how they did as well after Matt Gannis left Lee Valley to join them last year. There's no news out of the Lions as of yet over in North East London, because that's where you are, Lee Valley. I'm not having that argument with you again. Let's just have a look at the chat quickly. There's a few bits and pieces. Baker is a typical run for D-man. Big number of PIMs last season. Yep. Sign what you know. It's probably why Hull are going to end up with 4 import forwards. I can see Sean going to Bristol or something like that. Great guy. Didn't have enough stuff to say about Romford. Large part of the reason he was there is not the case anymore. Which, yeah, probably Adam Latham, all things considered. If I play next season, it'll be in the NIHL National. Brought a lot of intrigue. Yeah, and I think there's sometimes you don't want to give away the farm with the milk, Rossi. I think is probably the big thing on that. I think there's obviously options. I think coming back to Romford, I think it is definitely an option, because you can go back somewhere that you want. Of course, the big X factor in everything, and as I said, your copy and paste rumour for 25-26 season, X to Basingstoke, because that is a good Miller. If he knows the league, can step into a position where he has minimal fuss. Played U Sports before. I'm going to get a U Sports coach. It could be a really, really good situation for him if Jeff Flanagan is so inclined, because you know that Steve Nell, of course, having done some of the initial recruitment for the Bison, will have been doing bits and pieces. Miller's been linked to MK as well. Yeah, and we can all joke about the fact that MK, it's Moneybags, MK, Scrooge McLightning or whatever. But MK is an attractive place to play hockey. You're treated well, you're looked after well, really excited, really enthusiastic fan base, and you're generally paid well to boot. The only problem is trying to drive around Milton Keynes. That's the only downside, because I've tried to drive around Milton Keynes before and I hate it. I've run across roads in Milan that were easier to navigate than trying to drive around Milton Keynes. John Akers, of course, winner of our tickets to the Steel City Showdown. Good move for MK. 9 teams at South 1 is an ideal in reality, and of course you would have had 10 if Peterborough had been able to step up. Now my understanding there is a lot of that was kind of driven by some bits from Slava Kulikov, of course, has now moved on from Peterborough, and therefore it's just not going to function this time. But they, obviously, MK Phantoms 2 have said they will look to step up the following season, which seems fair enough to me. Scary that MK could potentially run 5 forwards with Wallace next season. I don't think they will. I'm pretty certain that MK will use one of their import slots on a defenseman. Do I think it'll be Jonathan Spatterford or Patrick Fulbo? That bit I do not know. But certainly I'd be hugely surprised. It wouldn't surprise me if Wallace signed himself and used himself as a spare, in the way that Adam Latham kind of did when he was hurt at times last season for Romford. It wouldn't surprise me for MK to have 5 imports, one of which being Wallace, because effectively Wallace is a mulligan. 5 imports. Yeah, I think that's entirely fair, Rossi. I think MK probably will do that. This is where my bit of geography goes slightly wonky, because who is there between the north of London and Peterborough and Milton Keynes? The Cambridge Kodiaks. Congratulations to them. We'll talk about the women's playoffs moment in a little bit. It should be said. But yeah, MK and Peterborough, and of course, massive upheaval in Peterborough in the sense that after 11 seasons of being the bane of my existence in Peterborough, Slava Kulikov earns himself a place in the new order at Sheffield. He will be the head coach of the Sheffield Steel Dogs, as well as assisting Aaron Fox with bits and pieces. And you know what? I have banged on about this for years, and I will, for people who are newer to this, I do not dislike Peterborough fan. I do not dislike the organisation. I do not dislike their fan base. What my problem has always been was that I found Slava Kulikov hockey unattractive to watch. Now, some of you older viewers, I know, please do not fall off your chairs in surprise. Now, Phantoms hockey is incredible. Slava Kulikov hockey, incredibly effective, and that's probably why Sheffield have made this move in the way that they have done. Because for folk who don't watch the Elite League a lot, Elite League hockey is incredibly structured. Very, very North American AA, AAA in that sense. Lots of systems, lots of guys playing their roles, and maybe kind of lacking some of the freedom that National Division hockey gets, where it is a bit more kind of do as you feel. But ultimately, Aaron Fox has a structure and a system that he plays. Lots of guys coming up are not used to playing that kind of structured game. And if the Steel Dogs are there now in this new position, where they are there to develop British players for the Steelers and get them ready for going up, who better? Who better than Slava Kulikov in this circumstance to do that job? Ultimately, very few people. I know he was in the chat earlier. Whether Jamie McElroy, the GM of the Sheffield Steelers, is still lurking around, I don't know. Who's your big signing on Friday? Well, it's not me. It's not you. So unless you've managed to wrangle in somebody, Reece Kelly and young Mr. Nielsen to ice a few games for you next season, then I will just leave it up to the gods to let me know that one later. But what does it mean for Peterborough ultimately? 11 years of knowing what you're getting. Now, obviously, some of the names very much not disappearing from the roster on that sense. Billy Thorpe back, Louis Kinniston back, Nathan Salem, Callum Buglas, Luke Ferrara, Cam Huff obviously back, Hayden Levine also back, Tom Norton, Scott Robson, Brad Bowering. Ultimately, even with Slava going, you're going to get a lot of what you know. Now, what will be interesting is who takes over in this sense. Now, of course, the Bison's coaching position filled by Jeff Flanagan. That leaves a few names still up in the air. Matt Myers, does he become an option, having left Cardiff with the new order down at the Devils with Paul Thompson in charge? Does somebody step up? Does Nathan Pollard, of course, has announced he's back for the Division 2 Phantom side, so it won't be him stepping up in the immediacy. There's a few other people who might be able to step up from bits and pieces. Dare I say it, does Joe Wilson cross the Ashes line and take on a head coach's job? Could Matty Myers go to Phantoms? He could, but his issue is a lot of his work is based down in the southwest. So because he is like a builder and carpenter to my understanding. But you never know. Get us off. If hockey is the thing he wants to do for a little bit, he may well make the sacrifice and go along that route. There's a lot of the same Phantoms names, and I think you'll get a lot of the same Phantom style, irrespective. But like I say, the big issue for Peterborough is that when you force them to play open, the rosters that they've had the last couple of years, irrespective of how good they are, it's always a tough one. It'll be a tough one for them. Player coach. Now, I did wonder about this, and I still think it depends what the remaining ownership of the Phantoms want to do. Because do you ask Jimmy Feds to do it? Do you ask Tom Norton, of course, who's been part of the coaching staff with Slava Kulikov, to be a player coach? My feeling on those two is no. If they get a player coach, it will be somebody who will come in new to the organisation, in my opinion, unless they get really, really stuck, in which case then it'll be Norton over Ferrara. It's one of those things. Like I say, there's not been much buzz around about any potential names. Of course, there was a bit of talk of course of Myers to Basingstoke because of the ease of travel for that one, and of course Steve Nell went so far out of left field. He went so far west. He crossed the ocean to do it. But there we go. But like I say, Joe Wilson could be an interesting one in Peterborough if he fancies having a full-time head coaching gig rather than just being the assistant to Tim Wallace. For MK, you kind of know what you're getting. The playoff champs themselves, Elite League older boy, yeah, maybe. Nottingham boy, further on in his career, could play a coach in the National Division. Rob Lakovich. I think he personally stays in the Elite League myself, of course, doing some interesting work with the Perth Thunder down under. But if we're going to throw a name out there with absolutely zero backing or anything that's going on at all, let's chuck that one into the mix, because he would be of the ilk where he could potentially do it. David Clark, there you go. David Clark's going to come back and coach Peterborough. But yeah, MK, the playoff champs, doing the just very, very calmly, very, very quietly, going about their business. And because, of course, you've got Basingstoke come back and the Bees going and no coach in Peterborough, a lot of people are not really looking super hard at MK. But I mean, in terms of some of the names who are back, like I say, it's a lot of the familiar faces at the moment. No new names, of course. Carter Hamill's headed north back to the Solway Sharks. I've played for them before, and congratulations to Ross Venus on his career. All the best for you, sir, wherever you might be going. But all the names who are back, like I say, it's all people we all knew. Archie Salisbury back, Jordan Headley, Will Curlin, and for people arguing, that is a starter and a backup situation there. There's no 1A, 1B when it comes to those two. Corey McEwen back, Tim Wallace back, Rio Grinnell Park, Thomas Rutkiss, Jordan Cowney, Malik Martelli, Ed Nags. Getting Sean Norris back is both really, really good for MK, and like I say, I'm slightly disappointed. I was hoping that Norris would have another crack at the Elite League, and of course, the door's not ever fully shut on such things, but clearly, for me, not used to his full potential in Guildford last year. But we will see what happens on that front. Of course, Norris injuring his knee quite badly at the end of last year, so stick with what you know sometimes and what you're comfortable with, and we will see what happens in that one. But yeah, so we will. So MK, like I say, just quietly going about their business, which you think, given the fact that they won the last trophy of the season, you think more people would be talking about bits and pieces, but no, everyone's just kind of keeping calm, keeping chill, and actually, I think that benefits MK. Everybody looks to MK because of the money, because they are one of the big money players in the league. But actually, you know what? Sometimes it's good to just fly under the radar, at least for the moment, because I think when some of the import names start getting announced, that's when people start turning their eyes more to MK, because we will see what happens if they do pick up a Miller or a Schufelt, for example. We will, people will start chatting very, very heavily then. I will tell you that. Of course, we talked about the Thunder. Congratulate all the best to them as they move to Division 2, and you get the MK Peterborough Derby in Division 2 South, which should be a lot of fun. We keep edging further up the table. No news out of Solihull, because you never get any news out of Solihull. It should be said. Nothing out of the Coventry and NHL Blaze at the moment. Ollie Nags to MK. I don't wonder whether Ollie Nags might trade ice time for being slightly further down the table again. I would take Ollie Nags at Basingstoke. Depending on who you get in as an import D-man, because then having matched the two of them up and work that way. But Ollie Nags to play with Ed at MK, not an unreasonable assertion, all things considered. The one thing I'm actually interested in for Milton Keynes now is, do they look for a Division 1 affiliate? Because that gap, I mean, you can do that jump from Div 2 to National Division. Enough of the youngsters in Peterborough have done it in the past, but I wonder whether MK look towards doing some sort of deal with Solihull. That could be interesting. Sorry, that's me thinking out loud. I have nothing on that at all. That's just me thinking out loud. But I think MK could potentially benefit from having a Division 1 affiliate somewhere, in the same way that Peterborough have Nottingham. We'll see what we think on that one. We keep trucking our way into what is sort of officially the north, as we sort of hit Birmingham, which means we go west and we look at Telford. Hello. Obviously, a lot of people, Henderson and Thompson, back for the Tigers for next season, which of course has made everybody very, very happy. Apologies, I have just been sent just going to respond to that message I have been sent. But we have a quick look at the Telford Tigers, because a few, obviously, they sort of announced right at the beginning of actually before the end of the playoffs, we had that sort of raft of that sort of the core four: Brad Dave Rhodes, Mitchell King, Finn Howes and Harry Ferguson, all back for next year already. And then it's just all been imports: David Thompson, Eric Henderson and Patrick Brown, the new one, announced today. He joins from Wilfrid Laurier University in Canada. So that is 3 import forwards already on the docket for Tommy Watkins and Telford. 6'2". So obviously quite a big lad into the bargain, and ultimately as well, you know what Henderson and Thompson are going to be. Brown as well. If this is going to be like effectively your first year as a pro hockey player, going into a team like Telford, where actually you don't need to be the guy, because Henderson and Thompson are going to be those guys, and a place where you can kind of come in, start, get some really really solid second line minutes, and kind of just truck along. And actually, if you get the ability to kind of step up and do more, step up and do more. Really, really good situation for him. I think it's a really Telford is a good team where you're going to get minutes, you're going to get played, and it's going to be right as rain. Tom Watkins is a good coach. Yeah, Telford had a nightmare of a year last season. Started poorly. Injuries up the wazoo. 3 recognised defensemen at one point. We had Louis Newell and Adam Harding playing on D. Telford was a tough one last year. I think Telford should go heavy metal hockey like Hull for shits. No, that is not how Tom Watkins does things, Rossi. So you're not going to get that one, unfortunately. But there's a lot to be said. There's a lot to be said for it. Only one departure actually at the moment from Telford officially, which is Adam Harding, who returns to Basingstoke. So welcome back, Hards. Let's have a look at that new camper van, shall we? But yeah, there's lots to be there. Brown looks a solid addition to roster. Question might be what Brit depth looks like, especially losing someone like Harding. Well, I suppose in some ways as well, if you've lost Harding, Brown. Let's quickly whack up Brown's elite prospects, just because I am Telford Tigers elite prospects, because ultimately this is one of the things where having a 4th import could really, really do you well, because one of the things that we struggle with sometimes in this country is really, really solid centre depth. And actually, yeah, Patrick Brown's a centre. So there is your answer in some ways, because you've got Henderson who can play a centre, Thompson who can play centre, Brown can play centre. It's Harry Ferguson can play centre, but he's not the best at it in my opinion. I think he's much better suited to being a winger. But you've got guys who can play up the middle. But if you've got Henderson and Thompson who can both do it for a top line, and then Brown can centre your second line, you're probably going to be okay. We'll just very quickly look. What did Wilfrid Laurier University actually do last year? Because I did not. So definitely not in Canada West. Wilfrid Laurier University. So Wilfrid Laurier University play in the Ontario University Athletics bit. So the OUA operate 2 divisions in the sort of the wider the U Sport system. You have OUA East, which kind of also encompasses a bunch of the universities in Quebec, but it also includes places like Nipissing University, which will be familiar to people who watched Basingstoke and Swindon, because that's where Colby Tower and Gail Labuele both played. Concordia University is over there, the University of Ottawa, McGill in Montreal, Trois-Rivières from the University of Quebec, and Ontario Tech are all in that bit. And then OUA West has places like Toronto Metropolitan University, which is where Ryan Wells played for, the University of Toronto, which is where Joe Rand played. Shout out Joe Rand, for those of you who remember. But also University of Guelph, last year, from where Jeff Flanagan came, who finished 8th of 10th. Wilfrid Laurier University, bottom of the OUA West, with a record of, he says I've pressed the wrong button there. Wilfrid Laurier University had a record of 5-23. Ouch. Yeah, 5 wins, 23 losses on the season last year, which is not an ideal one if in terms of that one for the Golden Hawks. Just looking at the stats though, in terms of the actual roster itself, Brown middle of the road in terms of the points there, 9 points in 26 games at centre. I was going to say I'm terrified to look at some of the net minding numbers from last year for them. But he does come with a relatively decent pedigree, does does Brown. A good chunk of time in the OHL playing with the North Bay Battalion. Obviously, will end up sort of falling out of the OHL into the OJHL and the MJAHL before heading off to university. But it comes with some decent pedigree. Who's he playing junior with? Who's on North Bay? Justin Brazeau, Brandon Coe, Mitch Russell, Joe Verbetic. So he's played with a few guys who've had, you're drafted into the NHL. Justin Brazeau scored 113 points in 2018-19 in Brown's last full year of playing in the OHL, which is pretty bonkers. But yeah, so like I say, Brown appears to answer the question a little bit of who the Harding replacement is, because there's your top six centre. In terms of that one, just manifesting another fan base sharing our pain. Nope, absolutely not. You get nothing. You get nothing in Hull. But yeah, so it does. I think Tom's point about brick depth becomes interesting then, because where is your third line centre in that one? Do you potentially put, because you wouldn't want Ferguson. You wouldn't want Ferguson playing. For me, at least, you wouldn't want Ferguson as a third line centre, which you could play him as a second line winger, in my personal opinion. But that isn't that one. But there is in fact more news out of Telford. Not just signings, not just new imports for the national division team, but the Tigers 2 are on the move, having conquered Division 2, in the north. Last year, and done all kinds of madness there, and then run Peterborough very, very close in the National Division 2 playoff final. Telford Tigers 2 are on the move. They will join Division 1 North for next season. Now, of course, many of you remember Ollie Hunt coming into the chat last year and telling us why Tigers 2 could not move up, but they will be doing so for 2025-26, because there is, of course, a gap in North 1. We will talk about that as we slowly edge our way further up the country. Of course, questions, comments, thoughts, feelings, keep chucking things into the chat. But yeah, really interested to see what Tigers 2 do next year. Vlad Luca in Division 2 was a joke. And that is a bit of a fun. Luca the Bazooka is coming for the whole Jets. Yep. Yeah, it's going to be fun this year as well. And of course, if we're looking into Division 1, of course, one of the teams that they will be playing, we've already mentioned Solihull, and Lord knows what's happening there. But our friends at Deeside have been very, very busy. Has Sean Bebbington and the crew up in Queens Ferry with a bunch of new names added to the lineup there. Tyler Delabatouche, because he's off to university, has signed on for the Dragons. But in terms of obviously a few guys on the way out, Mark Lovell's retired, James Parsons has moved to the Deeside Dragons too, and there was a raft of guys announced as not being back. Jakob Hayek, Jason Burgess, Brady Jessen, Matt Croyle, Ollie Booth, of course, who's definitely going to go on to bigger and better things as Ollie Booth, and James Shaw has now moved to the Deeside Dragons 2, as they are now known. The Deeside Ducks have changed their name. But looking in terms of what is there for the Dragons, I mean, Mike Clancy remains as head coach. Jake Witkowski is now player, assistant coach, and head of business operations for the Dragons. Reece Edwards has moved across from the Hull Seahawks. A few guys returning on the second years of their deals. Henry Phillips, Daniels Fadiyevs, Cody Ogden is in there as well. Tyler Delabatouche signs for 2 years. Like I said, that's all. From my understanding, that's due to sort of education bits and pieces up there for him. Cody Ogden returns as well. He is on a 2-year deal, and Ben Roscoe is the only other name so far on that Dragons roster. As we sort of skim our way through bits and pieces. North Wales, we do go back east actually to look at the Nottingham Lions. There's nothing yet. There's not going to be anything out of Nottingham for a while. They'll announce the bits and pieces eventually. Can Connor Lee play centre on his two-way from Manchester? That depends on what happens with Connor Lee, of course. Connor Lee leaving the Manchester Storm midway through the season. The Storm retain his rights, but he was playing with the Penticton Vs of the BCHL. Whether he will come back to Britain, not confirmed in any direction, one way or the other, it should be said. But lots to be said for Connor Lee. Of course, came back, played with GB under-18s. was not playing in the playoffs really for Penticton. It was a healthy scratch, and so the V's allowed him to come back and play with the under 18s. Of course, he put up a pretty respectable performance, all things considered. I think they did pretty well. Came very, very close, of course, to that gold medal before falling agonisingly short. But yeah, nothing out of the Nottingham Lions. A fair bit out of the Panthers, of course, who won the Elite League playoffs and have just decided to just re-sign a large amount of last season's roster, which is fine. You did really, really well last year. Why would you struggle? Why would you throw that away at any stage? Like I say, geography though is slightly going out the window because you sort of bounced around a little bit there. As we sort of hit Nottingham, we will move towards Yorkshire and Lancashire, which is God's country, depending on who you are, depending on which side of that thing you ask. But we'll go to the west first, and of course, and we'll talk about the fact that Aaron Davies has retired from the Blackburn Hawks. We wish him all the best after the better part of 2 decades in a Hawks jersey. So all the best to him. Seriously, has to be a conversation at Blackburn for whether his jersey is retired, given his service to that club. Does remain to be seen. A few names, of course, that have come out from the Hawks in terms of who they have signed. Not quite as much movement as at D side, but Dominic Osman announcing that Andy McKinney, Adam Barnes, Jacob Lutwich, Lee Pollitt, and Bobby Streetley are all back. One new face, of course, Tom Barry, leaving the Sheffield Steel Dogs to join the Blackburn Hawks. I think that is a really, really solid move for both parties. So I think Barry can be a much more sort of dominating defenseman in that level now than he can be at the national. Of course, the best scoring rate of any player to ever play for Basingstoke, Tom Barry, 1 game and 2 goals. What a game that was. That was absolutely mad. But yeah, still looking over Lancashire. Sort of Lancashire side of things there, because Blackburn, of course, the larger sort of Lancashire presence, as it were, which means, of course, we then need to head ever so slightly towards Yorkshire, which is apparently quite big. There's quite a lot of hockey in Yorkshire, all things considered. Apologies, Widnes. There's no news out of Widnes. Not really. Although, apart from the fact the new Solway Sharks 2 side means a lot of those youngsters are not going to be playing in Widnes next year. But then Yorkshire, of course, the champs, the Leeds Knights. There's no news out of their Division 1 roster at the moment, so we don't know who's going to be playing there. But a fair bit of work going into the Knights, of course, having claimed the league and claimed the cup and then missing out on the playoffs at the end. A refresh happening at the Castle from head coach Ryan Aldrich. A few players out. Obviously, Matt Hayward retiring from hockey. We wish him all the best. Matt Barron, Noah McMullen not coming back. John Boesa, Ethan Hare and Harrison Walker all confirmed as not returning. Ethan Hare, of course, a day 1 Leeds player, played with the Chiefs before they became the Knights. A few new additions, of course, as well. Sam Cooper joining from the Steel Dogs on the back end. Balint Pokodzi, who was coached by Aldrich at OHA UK in Swindon all those years ago, so no huge surprise there. But otherwise, it's a returning cast of characters. Mac Howlett, Bo Neely, Finn Braden, who was outstanding last year. This could be a massive year for him. Jordan Griffin, Sam Gospel, and of course the big man himself, Kieran Brown. After getting his GB call up, I think a few of us wondered whether we would see Kieran Brown back in the National Division, but he is back for Leeds to start the year, at least. And like I said, it's a bit of a refresh on a few bits and pieces there. Cooper is a class signing. I remain to be fully convinced by Sam Cooper, and it's more just because I think it's because when I see him with my own 2 eyes, he doesn't play well. And this was a problem I used to have with Tom Watkins. For the first couple of years of me watching Tom Watkins with my own 2 eyes, he always seemed to play really poorly when I watched him. But yeah, I think the thing with Cooper, I think this is the opportunity now to prove it. You're playing on the league champions, you're playing on the double winners. Cooper, prove me wrong, I think is probably the thing I'd say there to Sam Cooper. I think he's, if you're shuffling bits and pieces around, I think he's the kind of player that Ryan Aldrich traditionally does very well with in terms of coaching. It's up to him now, of course, to put all those pieces together in whatever kind of structure and format Aldrich gives him to work within. And of course, we're interested to see what the Knights do for an import defenseman. McMullen not coming back? What do they get in its place? And who goes alongside that defenseman for that bit of work? With his age and being under Aldi, I could see him flying. Yeah, entirely possible. Like I say, he's made me scratch my head a little bit over the last couple of years, Sam Cooper. All things considered. But yeah, Leeds obviously doing a fair bit, and then we go to Sheffield, of course, who don't have Sam Tremblay. Who don't have Sam Tremblay anymore. What a massive crushing shock that was. I mean, fair play. I'll say this as well, because of course. Jack and Dan on Macca's Talk Hockey talked a fair bit about the, about this idea that the Steel Dogs fans kind of get a bit of a short shrift of, gotten a bit of short shrift of this because the Steelers said, this is what we're doing. Don't worry, we're borrowing him for the end of the season, but you're getting him back and then actually kind of taking him away. I get it. And I get the frustration of Steel Dogs fans, but I think this is one of those things where firstly you have to have seen it coming. Contracts in British hockey sometimes are not worth the paper they're printed on. Some clubs are much better at it than others. Some contracts in British hockey might as well be written on the back of the envelope your gas bill came in, and some of them have clauses that if they were challenged in court would stand up about as well as a house of cards in a hurricane. But ultimately. I get the frustration for Steel Dogs fans in this one, but the Steel Dogs now do not operate solely to win. That's not their premise anymore. Not that it's ever any club's real sole premise anyway. But this idea that the overall goal of the Sheffield Steel Dogs is to become the National Division champions is not there anymore. Like what is the overall sporting goal at the end of a season for the Milton Keynes Lightning? Win the league, win the title. What is the overall sporting goal of the Leeds Knights, of the Swindon Wildcats, of every other team in the National Division? And what is the difference here? Is that the Sheffield Steel Dogs are an alternate team now. They are the developmental affiliate. The sporting goal of the Sheffield Steel Dogs is not solely to win hockey games and win the league. It's to have those those players ready to swap one orange shirt for the other. And that's not a nice thing to have to deal with for some people, because the Steel Dogs for a long time were the alternative. And they were and have always been a really fun alternative. I will maintain until my dying day that the Steel Dogs changing into the orange and white was a terrible mistake. They should have stayed in their blue colours, because I still feel that keeping a more distinct identity for the Steel Dogs is better, in my personal opinion. And you could always run it with the idea of, to wear Steelers orange, you have to earn it, and do it that way. But ultimately, the Steel Dogs have a different place now. And yeah, it's not great for the carrot to be dangled in front of him. You're getting Tremblay back, only to not get him back. We all saw it coming. And that's not great sometimes. And sometimes it's like watching the car crash. Everything goes into slow motion. You know you're going to hit the car in front of you, but you just can't stop it. And that's just kind of where that is on that front. Ultimately, it has to be said that. He says, quickly responding to a message. But in terms of what Sheffield do, Slava Kulikov now in place. Great appointment, like we talked about earlier, in terms of having somebody set the younger players up that are coming through that system to do something with it, right? Obviously, we know there's going to be a few guys back. The one I'm interested in, from a Sheffield perspective, Finn Ulrich. He's obviously young enough to remain on a two-way. I wonder whether he spends a lot more time up than he does down this year. It's completely skip past. Where are the Steel Dogs? There we go. Skimming too fast. So Björklund Nordstrom back. Walker Summer back, obviously obviously great news there. Alex Oldell coming in is really good. That is a really smart organisational signing. Oldell needs minutes and needs to play. He didn't get nearly enough minutes last year with Manchester, despite the fact that Evan Weniger kind of wobbled around a little bit, and Oldell was sat there more than capable of playing. But what you have here from Sheffield is, what did Sheffield have issues with last year? Greenfield got injured. Guys on the Steel Dogs got injured. They obviously called in Tom Brown, who'd left Romford. Alex Oldale is an ideal keeper for this situation. Needs to play, so playing for Sheffield is a really good start for that. But if something goes awry above, you're not throwing somebody in the deep end, because Alex Oldale's played Elite League hockey. He knows what he's doing there. Obviously, he's not going to be the only netminder in Sheffield. There'll be other people coming through. Will Curtis Warburton be back? We don't know. Will Norton be back? We don't know. But what we do know is that from a position of having a netminder ready to go in both of those circumstances is a really good linchpin signing. Great for the Dogs, because I think Oldell is more than capable of carrying 30, 40, 50 games at a national division level. I don't think he does. I think he will end up on the bench at the Steelers a bit more than that, to the point where he's not only missing 4 games a year. But but like I say, that is a really good signing that I think is great in a lot of different ways. And ultimately as well, he's a Sheffield kid. It's not, for all the jokes you can make about the Sheffield Steelers, a kid from Sheffield wanting to play for the Steelers is not unreasonable, is it? Unless the EHL have changed their rules, I don't think Ulrich can go on a 2-way next year. He's now 25. He either goes Elite or NIHL. I'd forgotten his age, Chris, if I'm 100% honest. But ultimately, best case scenario for me, Finn Ulrich is full-time in the Elite League next year. I personally, off the back of his performances, I think he's earned it. If I'm 100% honest. Ben Morgan, of course, back and playing. I venture he'll probably help Slaver out with a few bits and pieces. I think Ben Morgan, the player, is better than Ben Morgan, the coach, in this circumstance. CJ Garcia to the Dogs as well is a fun one. I actually quite liked watching him last year at the times I commentated on Guildford versus Manchester. Whilst I don't know necessarily who's done all of the recruitment, CJ Garcia is an archetypical Jamie McElroy signing, because he's assigned an absolute massive unit of a human to hit people. I love you, Mac, for that one. That is a you signing, and you're going to be very happy with CJ Garcia. Let's put that one that way. But yeah, in terms of out from the Steel Dogs confirmed, anyway, Tom Barry, of course, as we know, is gone. Sam Cooper gone, and Sam Tremblay has gone. And then, of course, my friends Hull. Hello, Rossi, if you're still lurking around in the chat, and you lot. Vindaloo Hockey, as ever, it looks like it's going to be in Hull. We're going to score one more than you, and you blooming well better have to, because Declan Balmer's gone. He's off to Australia. And by the way, Australian folk, somebody signed Deck Balmer. He'll do absolute bits in the AIHL. Maybe not as many bits as David Booth is going to do, having just signed in the Australian League. That's pretty mad. But a lot of the familiar names kind of back. There's no new names, bar one, of course, and that is Geordie Stallard joining from the Fife Flyers. But it does a lot. There was a little bit of chatter, of course, nothing substantial, about whether Sobchuk would actually return for year 2. As far as I'm aware, he is back. But of course, now we have Jordan Stallard, who's an import forward. We have Owen Sobchuk, who's an import forward. So that's 2. Will we see? Johnny Cornell is there. Johnny Cornell's on that list. He is. He is back as well, as far as we're aware. Emil Svek would make a 4 import forward Hull Seahawks. Goodbye defence. Goodbye defending. The BOTW line is coming out. Why defend when you just don't fit? Well, the BOTW line is why defend when you could not defend. You're not even bothering at that point. That's just giving up the ghost. We only have Chambo, Bones, Hewitt, and Bruton signed up. I mean, yeah. Obviously, Davey Phillips is back. Davey, if he can stay fit. And for me, what will go down is, I think, one of the underrated signings of the summer so far. And that is the fact that that Matty Davies has made the signing, pulled the trigger. Tommy Spraggan leaves the Billingham Stars and joins the Hull Seahawks full time. I was telling all of my Billingham friends, God love them and their Palmos, I said to them that Tommy Spraggan was not long for Division 1 because he was more than prepared and more than able to be in the National Division full time. He is in the National Division next season full time, where he should be. It will be... Tommy is fantastic. He's also incredibly attacking-minded defenseman. Oh, wait. Oh, well. Hey-ho. It is going to be a lot of 6-5s. On that one. Dear me, my phone is having an absolute wobble. It was also helpful if I could spell. There we go. Really excited for Spraggs. You should be. He is a superb player. Absolutely superb player is Tommy Spraggan. Spraggan for forward. Your defence are all essentially forwards now anyway, so I don't think it makes any difference at this point. The final input is Emil. Not only is it not a D-man, but also one of the least offensive-minded forwards in the league. Yeah, this is Matty Davies just sticking a massive middle finger up, and Davy Phillips just sat there just going, well, what do I do now? I mean, Davy Phillips likes a bit of not the most, not a massively attacking forward. Tom Stubley, not the most attacking forward. So maybe just siding like 6 stay-at-home guys would have been a little bit lopsided. But I think the net minding is going to be... is going to be the really, really big one, of course. We know Jordan McLaughlin already back. No word as of yet on Dimitri Zamostra and what he does going forward on that one. But, I mean, all the big names are already back on that front. We do know Jordan Fisher's not coming back. Chris Wilcox not coming back. Reece Edwards, of course, we know is already off the D side. And Barmer is off to go hunt some kangaroos or whatever. Long live the Heineken League. Yeah, we're into Kevin Conway 200-point seasons. Hull will score like 500 goals and concede 499. Harrison Walker to Hull. Interesting. McLaughlin and Walker as a net-minding duo, I think, is quite predicated on one, them being absolutely fine facing 40 shots a night, and two, that they're prepared to just have, that they're prepared for what's coming. I think that's the really, really big thing. And to be fair to Matty Davies, Matty will tell you how he sees it. And if he's going, as the boys at Slapshot joke about, heavy metal hockey, if they're going for goals, then the netminders are going to need to be prepared for it. But then again, the last time Hull were really successful, 2018-19, where they conceded a buttload of goals, but scored a buttload more goals. Shout out to Sonny Carlson. So it can be done. Like, it can all be done. It's all just a matter of whether it all kind of comes off for them at this point. No news as of yet out of the Hull Jets, and what they will be doing. I haven't seen any immediate signings out of them. No, we have not. No signings out of the Sheffield Scimitars either, it should be said. Not a lot of movement at all in North 1. It's mostly Blackburn and D-side just keeping everything ticking over right now. And even then, Billingham haven't announced anybody apart from the departure of Tommy Spraggan. Spoiler alert, Michael Elder will be back, and so will Chris Sykes. So we'll see what happens on that one as Billingham look to retain their title. But in terms of sort of moving a little bit further, like I said, we've covered the Yorkshire lot. So as we move further north, we do need to look. Unsure whether Geordie shares minutes next season. Well, if you sign 2 guys and then have them battle it out, then whoever's top can kind of come out with it. Which then means we need to look to the north, east. As I said, Billingham champions. Pretty much swept the north, only to be pretty handily, convincingly walloped by Slough, who of course have signed a large amount of their roster back for next year. The Jets are going to do the Jets, and they've got their new second team and everything like that. Billingham, nothing as of yet. I went to their presentation night. Their GM says they have a few things in the pipeline. Every GM says they have a few things in the pipeline. With all due respect. With all due respect, at least when Mac tells me he's got something in the pipeline, he then pulled Slava Kulikov out of his pocket. So I will at least believe Mac when he tells me that. But yeah, so we head a little further north. Nothing in Billingham. But Whitley have apparently given up on geography, and the Whitley Warriors have left the National Ice Hockey League to join the Scottish National League. Now, this is a very, very bizarre situation in my personal opinion, and I don't get it. I'm going to quickly pull up the press release from the Warriors on this one, and have a quick scoot at this, because for me this just makes zero sense. So this was the press release that was put out yesterday afternoon, just 4:00 yesterday afternoon from the Warriors. Whitley Bay Ice Rink, owners of the Whitley Warriors, are excited to announce that for the 25-26 season, from the 25-26 season, the team will compete in the Scottish National League. Whitley Warriors and a second Solway team will both join the league for the coming season. So blue Solway's news for them. Well done there, Whitley. Meaning the league will consist of the following 9 teams: Whitley Warriors, Solway Sharks 2, Edinburgh Capitals, Aberdeen Lynx, Dundee Rockets. Of course, that was the Tigers and the Blue Nevers. I've forgotten the name of the other team. Oh, it was Dundee Tigers and somebody else. The two SNL teams in Dundee merged to make the Rockets: Kirkcaldy Kestrels, Kilmarnock Thunder, North Ayrshire Wild, and the Paisley Pirates. Shout out to Paisley. Mac's still listening somewhere, I'm sure. This decision has been made primarily due to fixture scheduling. EIH have informed clubs they must be prepared to have up to 50% of their home fixtures on Saturdays going forward, which is not viable for the club or the ice rink. Why? Is Newcastle United, which gets 45, 50 Dundee comments, thank you, 45 to 50,000 people, going to affect you that badly? Newcastle play in the Premier League. They don't play every Saturday as it is. Like, this feels absolutely bonkers as a thing purely based on that basis, right? The club see this as a fantastic opportunity to join a growing and exciting league which continues to expand. Also very true. Matches against Edinburgh and Dundee in recent years have been competitive and created fantastic atmospheres in both Whitley and Scotland. Also true, does not join up to the previous thought you've just thrown out into the air there, Whitley, but okay. The club will also participate in the Scottish Cup, a trophy we previously competed in and won. Very true. Depending on the results, Warriors will play a similar number of matches as past seasons, with the vast majority of home games taking place during the usual Sunday evening slot. I mean, yeah. It wasn't that much of an issue last year. I think Whitley had 4 Saturday home games last season when I last checked. We also have an agreement in principle to play local rivals Billingham Stars in a cup competition. Good. The details of which will be clarified once the league's fixtures scheduled. So you want to move because you're worried about fixture scheduling, but you still want to play Billingham. Sweet. Whitley Warriors GM Willie Dunn said, when the owners approached us regarding this, we were able to give some background information on the league and how it's grown in the last few years. Developing players is paramount, and we look forward to a number of our younger players. We believe we will have some great games in the SNL and old rivalries be reignited. With most away games being on a Saturday night and the majority of teams being closer, this also benefits our players who have faced long journeys home on Sunday evenings. Head coach Tony Hand said, we knew this was being investigated and has delayed us announcing players for the coming season. However, we can now push forward with our announcements for a season of great change and great opportunity. Whitley Bay equals South Edinburgh. Yeah, Berwick-on-Tweed. Berwick-on-Tweed for the football phone. Right, let's get Google Maps out. Whitley Bay Ice Rink. Whitley Bay Ice Rink. Hillheads. There we go. So, what's the furthest away drive they've got to do? Will be Solihull. Solihull Ice Rink. So, Whitley Bay. So, according to Google Maps, I look at it now. Whitley Bay to Solihull, which is the longest drive they've got to do, if you did it right this minute, 212 miles, 4 hours one way. It's pretty big. Pretty long way. When you consider Solway to Romford is 7 hours, right? Let's have a look at another team that's quite a decent drive for them. Nottingham. Nottingham's a pretty long old way as well. Nottingham, 3 hours 3 minutes, 162 miles. Okay, so that's a pretty decent one. If they'd stayed, they'd have to go to Telford as well. Telford Ice Rink. So Telford Ice Rink is 128 miles. 235 miles. Let's say 128. Probably as the crow flies. 235 miles, 4 hours and 8 minutes. Okay, so pretty sizable journey. So let's have a quick look then at some of the places they are going to be playing. Murrayfield, Murrayfield from Whitley Bay is 2.5 hours, 130 miles each way. Let's have a look then. Dundee Ice Arena. Whitley Bay to Dundee, 3 hours and 25 minutes for that one. North Ayr. Type in North Ayrshire Wild. So Whitley Bay to North Ayr, 3 hours and 29 minutes. And then, of course, we'll stick in the furthest one away, which I'm pretty certain will be Aberdeen. Whitley Bay to Aberdeen is 4 hours and 38 minutes. So effectively, they've swapped a bunch of long journeys for another bunch of long journeys in a different direction, which doesn't really ring true, all things considered, as we sit here looking at that. I don't quite get it. Not based off of that logic. Is it about time SNL and NHL North 1 merge? Maybe. I personally would rather the SNL be and the NIHL be merged into that one structure, and the SNL kind of be a conference of a larger league. It could be. Why should everyone have to travel all the way to Whitley on a Sunday night? Not unreasonable for them to have to take their turn. Yeah, actually, you know what, Richie? That's entirely reasonable. What I don't get is why it is so unviable for Whitley to play at home on a Saturday. Because obviously Newcastle United are. Obviously Newcastle United dominate the sporting landscape in that part of the world. It is what it is. So let's have a quick look at it. How many home games did Newcastle United play on a Saturday? Play on a Saturday this past season. Let's have a look at that. See what that says there. That has said nothing at all. Thank you, Google. That's massively unhelpful. ChatGPT. What does ChatGPT say? Will ChatGPT actually give me an answer to this? Is it because they haven't been regularly competitive in North 1 for a couple of seasons now, and they think the SNL may be a level they compete in more effectively? You know what? I'd have respected them if they'd done that. All things considered, they just turned around and said, you know what? We just think we can be more competitive with the budget that we have if we play in a different league. So, a few bits and pieces. So Newcastle played at home 12 times out of their 19. 12 of their home games were on a Saturday. Like, what is this nonsense? All things considered. Bit of a strange one to me that I do not fully understand on that front. And then there's Solway, of course, who of course will have their new who have the new SNL side, which is obviously going to be a lot of fun for them. Who else have we got on Solway? Also, if I could blooming do the alphabet, there we are. A lot of the familiar names, of course, are back. Kel Beattie, Liam Stenton, Torrin Anderson, Jordan Marr, Callum Hepburn, so there's your netminding duo for next year. Olivia Arsenault back on a 2-year deal, so he clearly very, very much enjoys the mountain biking and the golfing. Carter Hamill is really the only big addition so far, joining from MK, of course. You know, Solway is a good place for guys from Northern Ireland to be based, as Kel Beattie will tell you. Scott Henderson back, Bailey Thompson on a 2-year deal as well, given his age, not a huge surprise. Only one player has actually confirmed is leaving, but it is the big one. It is Nolan Gardiner, who has left the Sharks looking for opportunities in Europe. Now, I had been. I had heard some bits and pieces. Potentially, he was. As far as I'm aware, he will be heading to mainland Europe next year. I'm just looking to see very quickly whether he's actually been announced anywhere at the moment, and he has not. So I will not worry about that just now. There's been some chatter as to where he might end up in mainland Europe, but we'll sort of see on that one. I haven't really been told. What have we got here? Leeds make the National Division work with a rink literally in the Ellen Road car park, so I'm sure Whitley could have made North One in the same metropolitan area as Newcastle United work if they wanted. The crowds were slightly lower when Newcastle are playing, are still probably the best in the league, so surely can't be the reason. Big fan of the Hamill signing, clearly wants to show who he is with more ice time. Yeah, and fair play as well, and he obviously, him and his brother had some success up there in the past. And like I say, it's a good situation if you're based in southwest Scotland and you want to get back to Northern Ireland quickly. What we will do very quickly, as we've kind of gone from kind of top to bottom, questions, comments, thoughts, feelings, anything anybody wants to chuck in to the chat, please do. Where are we? 25 past 9. So we'll go for another sort of 5-10 minutes or so. So chuck in any bits you want to talk about very quickly whilst I go through the bits and pieces, because of course last weekend, the WNHL finals weekend, and Andrew has very, very kindly given me the big results of all the bits and pieces that we need to. We'll start with the under-16s because we had the two semi-finals there. Chelmsford with a very, very comfortable 10-1 win over the the Chelmsford Rattlesnakes with a 10-1 win over the Manchester Storm. Emmy Keharainen, the only scorer for the Storm. Isabella Judzienska with a hat-trick. 2 goals as well for Zinnia Quilter, 2 for Freya Price, 2 for Matilda Howe and 2 for Cara Jones as the Rattlesnakes eased their way through. The other semi-final was won by the Whitley Bay Beacons. They beat the Bristol Huskies Puppies by 5 goals to 1. Hat-trick for Olivia Bath in that one, which meant that we got a big, big final on for the under-16s that went all the way to overtime. But it is Cara Jones with the crucial moment, giving the Chelmsford Rattlesnakes the under-16s WNIHL national title. They beat Whitley Bay by 4 goals to 3 after overtime. The under-16s All-Stars were Sophie Ankers, netminder for Whitley Bay, Christina Powell on defence from Chelmsford, and Evie May Tyndall from the Whitley Bay Beacons at forward. WNHL Division 2. First semi-final, we talked about Cambridge. We said we'd say well done to them, and they certainly did very well in their semi-final. An 8-1 win for the Kodiaks over the Telford Wrekin Raiders. 2 goals from Julia Mabry and Christina Ashley, and goals from Ruby Allen, Erin Russell, Josie Milton, and Joa Hoshizaki. Erin Tipton with the lone goal for Telford in that one, and it was the same scoreline the other way. 8-1 win for the Streatham Storm over the Widnes Wild. Amy Jackson, Tala Gallagher, and Helen Clark with 2 goals apiece, and goals from Aine O'Kane and Sinead Jennings. Lean Decker with Widnes' lone goal. But ultimately, not quite as high scoring in the final, but Cambridge do the business. They take the WNHL2 playoff title with a 4-1 win over Streatham. Josie Milton, Christina Ashley, Alicia Anderson and Claire Ledbury for the Kodiaks. Sarah Larty with Streatham's lone goal there. The Division 2 All-Stars, Lilith Wright, netminder from the Streatham Storm, and then one each from the Cambridge Kodiaks. On defence for Claire Ledbury and Josie Milton as the forward with the Division 2 All-Stars. Division 1. Now, of course, Division 1, Division 1, if you win the Division 1 final, you get the opportunity to play for promotion to the Elite League. So big stuff at play here. A tight game in the first semi-final, but it was the Southwest versus Scotland, and Southwest comes out on top. The Bristol Huskies beating the Caledonia Steel Queens by 2-0. Kate Edgington and Mila Pironi scoring at opposite ends of the game there to take the Huskies through to the Division 1 final, where they would face their old nemesis from the Southwest in the Swindon Top Cats as they beat the Kingston Diamonds by 4-1. Lydia Lutwich with the Diamonds Division 1 roster's only goal. Ellie Wallace with 2, and then goals from Lily Endicott and Joy Scott Russell taking the Top Cats into the final. And then it was another back and forth battle, but Bristol earned their spot in the division in the promotion playoff as they beat the Swindon Top Cats by 3 goals to 2. Jess Jones, Ellen Pereira Mori, and Becky Osman with the game winner to take Bristol over the line. Ellie Wallace and Lily Endicott with goals for the Top Cats. Division 1's All-Stars were Gemma Davies from the Huskies in net, Becky Inker on defence from the Huskies, and then Ellie Wallace from the Swindon Top Cats was the forward from the All-Stars. And then, of course, that meant that we got, that leaves us with the Elite League. Could Solihull do the business and win the lot? Well, they certainly did well in the semi-final, beating the Guildford Lightning by 7 goals to 1. From 7 different goal scorers, Sam Payne with the Lightning's lone goal, answered by Jodie Alderson-Smith, Laura Horwood, Paige Breen, Katie Henry, Robin Mullin, Peyton Fincher and Ava Zolozzi. Hopefully I've got that right, Ava. Sorry if I've not. And then the Bees also scoring 7 in their semi-final against the Whitley Bay Beacons. They win by 7 goals to 2. A hat-trick for Louise Adams, 2 for Lily Endicott, and goals from Estelle Ip and Ellie Wallace. Steph Towns and Ruby Newlands with Whitley Bay's goals, which then led us to the clash of the Titans. Solihull finally overcame the Queen Bees, their nemesis during the season, to take the league title. But it's the Bees who take the playoffs. 2 goals from Louise Adams, including an empty netter 10 seconds from time. And it's a 28-shot shutout for Mackenzie McNamara for the Queen Bees as they take the playoff title by 2 goals to 0. McNamara, the netminder all-star in the Elite League. Sarah Hutchison from the Vixens on defence. Louise Adams from the Queen Bees at forward. You might have noticed a few names popping up in different teams there. Players can be dual registered across the WNIHL to give them more game time. But what that meant was we had the WNIHL Elite League Promotion Relegation Playoff. The Kingston Diamonds, who were bottom of the table in the Elite League, they play off against the team that wins their way through the playoffs to take on that team. And what it means is that the Kingston Diamonds are playing Division 1 hockey next year. The Bristol Huskies finally find their way and are at the Elite League level of the WNIHL. A natural hat-trick from Katie Edgington in a 3-0 win, and Bristol are promoted to the WNIHL Elite League. Commiserations to Kingston on that one, who dropped down to Division 1. And congratulations, though, to all at the Bristol Huskies on their promotion to the Elite League. Just going to have some water quickly because my throat's feeling a bit dry. Who's your signing of the window so far? I mean, it's May. So it's a bit hard to really... I think probably the big ones I'd say... For me, Ben O'Connor allows Swindon to do the thing that they are best at, which is long outlet passes. I think his quality... For folk who've not watched Ben O'Connor outside of GB for the last few years where he's been in the Elite League, they're in for a big shock. I think on that front, I think he's probably the signing of the window for me. Even at 36, he's a level above everybody in this division so far. People will talk about Bricknell to Bristol. For me, it's O'Connor to Swindon so far at the moment, but there's a long way to go on that front. Do the Oilers break Canada's Cup drought, or are we seeing Florida repeat? I think Edmonton do it. I do think Edmonton do it this year. Do you think the Bison will go import netmind, import D, and 2 import forwards? I do, Mark. Yeah, it's mostly just because I think from a British netminding option, who do we take? Is the issue there? That's the big question that kind of lurks on it for me. Who is our starting British netminder? That's the thing I can't quite get my head around. If we wanted to go like a 1 and 3, because I love Dean Skins, but we're not getting Dean Skins back for this year, all things considered. Right, where are we? 33 minutes past 9. So we've been going for over an hour and a half. So yeah, last call for bits and pieces. But yeah, good to be back. Good to have a chat about a few bits and pieces. Might try and we've done south to north. Maybe we'll do north to south next time and see what happens on that front. But hopefully, touch wood, we won't have more teams chopping and changing leagues at this point. So the next time, of course. Could someone like Tyler Perry be tempted to Basingstoke? Yeah, but I don't think he's starting. Albeit, Max Wright and Tyler Perry as a netminding duo would be good. Because the one thing I think Wright lacked was the ability last year, until Dean Skins came along, to really get some actual rest. Now, Wright is one of those keepers from who likes playing a lot. So in some ways, getting a netminder in like Perry who would want to play is maybe not what you do. But also I think as well it's important to have a net might have your number one challenged in the same way as that also as well as something does go wrong. Like I say, Jordan Headley and Will Curlin is not a 1A, 1B, that's a 1 and a 2 situation. But when Headley wobbled during the playoffs, Curlin could start a couple of games and make a point. So that's what you do on that front, in my opinion. But we will wait and see. Wait and see. But yeah, apologies, just having a pause there, just take a bit of a breath. Hopefully as well. We will see. So housekeeping then. We'll be back in a month's time, as this is during the off season. So of course we don't during the season we go every week, but during the off season we go on the last Wednesday of the month, which would take us to Wednesday the 25th of June. For the June off-season special of the What's Current stream. I'm not going to lie, the break has actually been really, really good. Researching one long piece has done really, really well for me. I really enjoyed it. It was a fun piece to write about Cantacuzino. If you haven't, please do go check it out. His life is insane. But yeah, actually making sure I had like a proper break and didn't immediately start diving into just doing a lot of extra stuff on the back. In the back when I didn't need to, and actually just kind of trying to cover with pointed depth rather than just kind of doing lots and lots and lots and lots and lots. Now, if what folk want to do that, that's on them. And it's not a criticism of anybody else's methods, but I'm knackered and actually I want to rest. Is the What's Current AIHL special coming soon? I need assistance in choosing a team. You know what? I will actually point you towards my friend Sean and Courtney over at Oz Hockey Media. They should be doing bits and pieces tomorrow. They do a YouTube show as well, like Oz Hockey Weekly. Definitely bits and pieces to do in there. If you want to pick a team, if you want somebody, any of the 8 teams we've got this year, because of course it's down to 8 with the 2 Sydney teams sitting out. It depends what you're after. Very, very different. A lot of different sort of stylistic bits and pieces. I was going to say, if you want a team that plays like Hull, all of them do, because defence kind of flies out the window when you watch like a 9-8 overtime win on Saturday morning. But yeah, go if you. Probably won't be doing an AHL What's Current special on that front, but certainly do go check out the folk at Oz Hockey Media for bits and pieces of that sort of better in-depth coverage. Of course, I love nattering about the AIHL because I've watched it every year for blimey over 15, 16 years now. I've been watching the AIHL. During the summers and bits and pieces. Apart from that one year where we couldn't watch the AIHL because they're weird streaming deals, so I watched the PHL, which is how I found Owen Sobchak. So it all works. Melbourne Mustangs is who I lumped on in the end. Yeah, that went well on Sunday, didn't it, John? 8-0 and fans trying to attack players. Always a promising sign, that one. Right, last call. Definite last call. As we edge towards that. But yeah, AIHL, I've watched the Melbourne Ice longer than any of the kind of my de facto team. If you want chaos that never wins, choose Adelaide. They're fun. They're really fun to watch. If you want a chaotic mix where you're not quite 100% sure, but you want a higher chance of them winning, Central Coast. If you like okay hockey that has the propensity to do well, but probably starts okay and then probably won't quite get there at the end, watch Brisbane. If you want slow starters who do well at the end, choose Canberra. If you want a team that was perpetually never quite gets there despite being very good and you hope will eventually get over the line, choose Perth. If you want the older guys who are very, very entertaining and then will potentially choke at the end, choose Melbourne Ice. If you want the guys who you're never quite sure whether they're going to do very well, then will probably do very well anyway, choose Melbourne Mustangs. If you want a team And if you just like frustratingly banging your head against the wall, choose Newcastle. A lively national atmosphere. Yeah, very unusual for that to happen, it should be said. And yeah, it was a bit of a weird sequence, but that doesn't happen. Right, we will call it there. Bannersonthewall.wordpress.com, your number one source for all things related to all things British hockey. That's right, I'm shooting for the whole moon at the moment and saying British hockey. Banners on the road, match night write-ups from past seasons, as well as all the bits and pieces that came before it, as well as hockey stories, long form, in-depth pieces of content. Please go check out the Gentleman Flyer and check out all the other bits and pieces before it. They're tons of fun to write. Also, as well, I know they're very, very long. Gentleman Flyer has an audio version, so if you struggle with reading, or like you struggle, you're not super interested in reading, or you struggle to read, there's an audio version where if you press play, it will read it for you, so you can check that out as well. 14 years worth of stuff over at bannersonthewall.wordpress.com. We are on Facebook, we are on X, we are on Blue Sky. All the links are down below. In the description, of course, and we are here on YouTube, so do make sure you subscribe to the Banners on the Wall YouTube channel. All of the old What's Current streams, interviews with all sort of manner and shape of people from across the world of ice hockey. Plenty of stuff to come as well in the next year. Not 100% firmed up my plans as to what exactly is happening next year in terms of content I'm creating. There's a few bits and there's a few wheels turning in the background that I need to get sorted, as well as making sure that I kind of, my son is getting older. I've got differing pressures on my time. So exactly what's happening at the moment, we do not know. What I do know is we will find a way to make sure the What's Current stream comes back next year. Subscribe to the channel, like the videos and all those bits and pieces as well. As well as down there in the description is the link to our virtual busking hat, buymeacoffee.com/BOTW. If you do like what you see, want to chuck a few quid in to support, please do. Do not feel obligated. We're never going behind a paywall. So if you don't have money, please don't spend it on me for the sake of it. Just, share a link out. Tell your friends and all that kind of stuff. Keep those algorithm hamsters happy, fat and fed. And then, as I said, last Wednesday of June, we'll be back for the next BOTW What's Current stream. But there we are. May. What a weird month, eh? Lots happened. Love to all the folk from the Bees. All the best to Whitley's for whatever the hell they're doing that for. A new team in Solway. Players moving, players retiring. Shout out to Ross Venus and Aaron Davies and Matt Hayward and everybody else who's calling time. And new careers to be made. 2 years at the national division level for Bailey Thompson to come, and lots of excitement to be had, and a whole nother month to see what comes next. Be happy, and if you can't be happy, then wherever you are, please do whatever you can to please be safe. As my friend Scully Watts would say, take care of yourself and somebody else. For bannersonthewall.wordpress.com, this is Anthony Russell saying stay safe. And so long till next time, we will see you in a month. And maybe, just maybe, we will have a few more ideas as to who might be topping the various divisions come the end of it. Oh, and GB back at the World Group. Bring on Zurich.